Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly fascinating source text that takes a really close look at the remarkable optical mechanics of fish eyes. We'll be unpacking an interesting argument presented by our author, one that basically uses the creatures of the deep to explore the very origins of life. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this, so let's just jump right in. So, here is the big question that kicks things off for our source material. How exactly does a fish manage to spot a bird swooping down from the sky while simultaneously tracking microscopic food floating right beneath it? Our source actually uses the complex biological answers to this specific question to argue a major philosophical point. It uses the mechanics of the fisheye as a springboard to discuss intelligent design versus chance. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the Underwater Vision Challenge, Threats from All Sides. Our source asks us to think for a second about the daily life of a fish in the ocean. They're basically living in a 360-degree hazard zone. They're constantly subject to attack from enemies above, like seagulls that swoop down to make a quick meal out of marine life. And because of this constant, everyday threat, the text points out that fish require specially constructed eyeballs. They need to look almost instantly in literally any and all directions. They have to see behind them, below them, above them, and on the sides, all at the exact same time. Talk about needing eyes in the back of your head, right? Moving right along to Section 2, Engineering for Light Refraction, Bending Light in Water. Now, seeing in all directions is one thing, but seeing clearly underwater is a completely different challenge. The source highlights a massive optical problem that fish have to deal with, and that's refraction. Refraction is basically the bending of light as it passes through water. If you've ever opened your eyes in a swimming pool, well, you know firsthand how severely that can distort your vision. For a fish, distorted vision means certain death. So the author argues that the fisheye is incredibly complex precisely because it's specifically designed to take this refraction of light into account. In fact, the text makes a really specific claim here. Because their eyes are engineered to compensate for this underwater light bending, fish can actually see 30% farther than other visual instruments. To put that into perspective, that is a massive biological advantage in the wild. And this brilliantly illustrates the first major analogy our source makes. The text compares human inventions directly to biological realities. It notes that, we tend to think it's this wonderful, brilliant accomplishment when a skilled oculist manufactures special goggles for divers to compensate for water refraction, but the author argues God did this for fish long before we ever did. The text presents the argument that just as divers' goggles could never have come into existence by sheer chance, the specialized eyeballs of fish, which act as these perfect natural goggles, well, they must also be the product of a creator. That brings us to Section 3, the Malayan bifocal fish, built-in bifocals. Here, the author moves from general fish eyes to one very unique creature living in the waters of Malaya. Now, what's really interesting about this is the incredible split-screen life this little fish leads. It's about the size of a sardine, and it's highly prized as food by seagulls, so the gulls are constantly swooping down to gobble it up. To survive, the fish has to watch carefully for this approaching danger, which obviously requires excellent far vision. However, it feeds on microscopic larvae that abound in the water right near it, which requires excellent near vision. So it has this constant, everyday need for split-screen awareness. So how is this biological puzzle actually solved? Well, according to our source, the creator provided a brilliant solution, a little membrane that comes exactly halfway up on its eyes. This physical structure gives the fish built-in bifocal vision. Because of this little membrane, that fish can look up and see the gulls coming while simultaneously looking down to see the nearby bits of life it needs to feed on. It's basically a natural multitasker. Which leads right into the source's second major analogy, once again comparing human engineering to nature. The text points out that we think it's absolutely wonderful when skilled optometrists and oculists perfect bifocal glasses that permit us to see both near and far away. Yet here is a tiny fish in Malaya that has had this exact same technology built right into its biology for thousands of years. The source uses this specific example to argue that God made it that way from the very beginning. Finally, we arrive at Section 4, Intelligent Design, Chance versus Creation. Zooming out a bit, our source takes these specific exhibits of biological evidence, the refraction compensation and the natural bifocal membrane, and uses them to directly contrast intelligent design with evolutionary theory. The text lays out the counter-argument it's challenging. It states that evolutionists contend that a fish's specialized eyeballs just happened. The author frames the evolutionary perspective as a belief that these highly complex, specialized optical features came into existence blindly, just by sheer chance. So, the crucial point here is summed up perfectly by this quote from the text. Concluding the analysis of the Malayan bifocal fish, the author states emphatically, it did not just develop blindly, it had to be created. Intelligent design was behind it. The source firmly positions these biological wonders as absolute proof of intentional divine engineering rather than random evolutionary development. And that leaves us with this final, provocative thought, which really summarizes the core premise of our source material today. When we observe highly complex engineering in nature, like a tiny fish with built-in bifocals and natural refraction compensating lenses, does it point to blind development over time or intentional design? Our source clearly argues for the latter, asking us to look deeply into the mechanics of the natural world to find evidence of a creator. It's a fascinating look at how biology and philosophy so often intersect. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking questions about the world around you.